Okay, I wanted to make a kind of step-by-step how-to on how to bring in OpenAI, be it ChatGPT or Dolly for photos. Get it started in your application. And so here I'm going to be using Node as my backend language of choice. So if you're going to be using Node like me, the only requirement is to download Node. And then I'm going to be, or I used a quick start tutorial. Now this is going to be a full stack app with React on the front end. And so I'm going to be following on this URL, platform openai.com docs overview, the documentation on this quick start tutorial. And in this documentation, I can kind of go through it real quick. You're going to need an account. It'll give you $5 in free credit. If you have an account and you don't have the $5 in free credit, you can follow this. If you deposit as little as $5, you need to go to your account settings. If you've already, it's like a 3-month trial, you only have the $5. So you might need to go to your settings under billing and add $5. And so you can kind of pay as you go, and it doesn't auto recharge. So those are the prerequisites: having Node, spending about $5 to get off the ground running, and again, it doesn't recharge the account. So kind of going back to the quick start, I'm going to choose Node as my language. We've already covered this base. You have to install, I would install this latest version, not the current feature. Just download it, install it, and that is the first step on this guide. Once you have Node installed, you need to install the Node library and npm install save OpenAI API. So we'll go through that. And then set up your API key. So I'm going to come back to this step because the next step, you'll need to set up an API key. And so again, under the nav bar here, we have API keys. I've already got mine. Obviously, this is not the full thing. You'll need to generate your own key. And then what I did to get this to work in all cases is I set it up for all projects on Windows. I followed this set of commands where I opened up permanent setup, step 3. So I can kind of go through here and show on this PC, or actually I just typed environment variables, edit the system environment variables. I clicked on this button for environment variables, and under system variables, here, and that's not the full key, but you could see I clicked new, and I set the variable name of OpenAI API key, and paste that in the value. So I followed this permanent setup that you will have to do on your computer. I'm not showing that on this tutorial because, well, I guess I just did. So that's kind of the prerequisites. Now to get into the actual code. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new folder. Again, I'm creating this from scratch. I'll call this ChatGPT integration. Okay, so this is my root folder, and I'm going to open this up in Visual Studio Code. So you will need to download Visual Studio Code if you don't have that already. And it's worth mentioning that if you have any terminals running after you set up that environment variable, you're going to have to kill the terminal and start a new terminal so that it will accept your credits. So set up the API key, set up the credits, and then create a terminal to kind of get going. And once you have a new terminal, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to install my React front end with npm create vite at latest. Okay, so this is going to install my front end folder. I'm just going to call it front end. and I'm going to choose React. So arrow down to React, and I'm going to choose JavaScript. And then I'm going to go to CD to my front end folder and run an npm I for npm install to install all the dependencies, and then run dev. So this is just getting the front end set up. npm run dev, and this should launch a front end that is React. Let me go ahead and close that. On the front end, I want to install two others, so Control C to kind of stop that from running. I'm going to install also Axios, which will be used to request something from the back end, request a back end resource. And I'm going to install Bootstrap on my front end as well, so I can bring in Bootstrap. And if I navigate down into my app.jsx component, I'm going to, inside of this return statement, go ahead and delete all the markup that is here, and delete the imports for the icons. I don't need the CSS. I am going to import Bootstrap, which is in the dist CSS Bootstrap min, and the JavaScript import. I don't know that I end up using the JavaScript, and I'll just go here just to bring in some Bootstrap dependencies, the CSS file and the JavaScript file. And I'm going to have a Bootstrap container, and this Bootstrap container I'll ultimately OpenAI Developer API integration. So it's a little H1, and if I run this on localhost, we get something like that. If I go into my main JSX, I can see a little more CSS here I don't need or want. So if I delete that, now all we really have is a Bootstrap container and a heading. And now if I go back into my form, maybe I go ahead and make a form element with class name of, if I go to get Bootstrap, let me get Bootstrap docs and forms. Okay, so there's no class name, but labels have a class of form label, and text box have a class of form control. So we'll just put a little, we'll get rid of the class name, and this will have a label, form label, and HTML4. I'll call it text question. Please enter your question. And this is a form control. It's a text box. TXT question is for the label. And I'm going to update my hook to the question and set question. And on click, when I change, I should say on change, when the user types in the text box, we're going to call the mutator set question, passing it the value that is in the text box. So we're basically setting up a React hook to store the question, and every time the user types in the text box, we are modifying the question variable to be whatever they're typing, and just to test that, you know, I always like throw in a little span with a question here, and let me launch localhost. Now this is your question, so you could see that the question variable is being set properly. And the only thing I did see is I don't want useState to initialize it as 0. I want it to be an empty string. Okay, so we're going to come back to our front end. We'll be pinging back and forth between the front end and the back end. But this is just kind of getting our front end a little set up. If I kind of minimize everything in that front end folder, Control C to end, and I'll go up a directory. Now this is my root. This is where my node app will be. So I'm going to start with an npm init/y for my back end. You can see this kind of creates a package.json. You can change some different things in here, like and give yourself an author. One thing that I prefer is I prefer to use the newer node modules. So I change, and you're going to need, if you're following this, to change the module type to ES6 module, so type of module. I also run a start dev script that runs nodemon. And I'll call my main file index.js. And then also for deployment purposes, I'll say start, and that'll be index.js, no comma on that second one. Let's go ahead and create our index.js. This is going to be where we put our Express server. So on the back end, the dependencies that we will need to bring in is definitely Express and OpenAI. So here, notice I am no longer in my front end folder. So if you go down the directory, if I do cd ... that brings me back up to the root folder, which I created on my desktop. Clear the screen. I'm going to go ahead and install Express and OpenAI. So this is the API that OpenAI makes available to us. Again, you have to pay for it or use that free trial. Now I'll just, on my Express server, bring in both of those dependencies at the top. So let's start with import Express from Express and import OpenAI from OpenAI. And we need to spin both of those up. So let's create our Express app, and let's create our const OpenAI equals new OpenAI. And because I made my key kind of a system-wide, there's no arguments that you pass into here. Now the next thing I need to do is I need to tell Express to have a landing page, app.use express.static of my front end dist. So this is going to be my landing page for the home page. It's going to be in a dist folder that's not yet created because we have to run a build script there. So we need to basically say, hey, when you launch the backend, Express should use this landing page inside of the dist folder. And we're also going to say app.use express JSON so we can receive JSON data from the client, and app.use express URL encoded extended to true. And again, this is to allow you to receive data from the front end. Now I'll make an app.listen, port 3000. So we'll boot up our Express server on port 3000, and with a console.log, and I'm going to type a backtick, which is above the tab key on the left side of your keyboard. Express server running on HTTP localhost 3000. So that should be a clickable link. And if I do my npm run start dev script, see what breaks. It doesn't like my import. I need quotes around the word express. Now let's try that again. Control C, yes. Rerun it. Okay. Okay, so we got our Express server running. Now, before it hits the landing page, I need to go back cd front end, and I'm going to run the deployment script npm run build. And run build is a command that's going to make that dist folder with index.html. And so now if I go back and go into my Express server, run dev, and control click, now that opens up. This is on localhost. So running my Express server pulls in my React front end. So far so good. Close, 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 close. The next thing I need now is a route to support, an Express backend route to support questions from the front end. And so we're going to say app.post. So we're going to have the user post with a button click. And the backend route, I'm just going to make it part of the root. So I'm going to make a variable here called user question. So on localhost / user question, arrow function, semicolon there. Let's read the user question from rec.param. So here we're creating a variable called user question. We're reading that variable from the URL. So this line 15 reads from the parameter variable in the URL and stores it in user question. And now we're going to call OpenAPI with OpenAI.chat.completions.create. Okay, so here's an object inside of this create. And inside of this object, we pass it a messages property, which is an array with a role of system, SYSTEM, and a content of the user question, comma, and model, and GPT 3.5 hyphen turbo. So it's version 3.5. System. And because this is awaiting, we need to make this async function so that we can await this create function. So here's basically we're passing the user question to their create method and getting some data back in a completion object. And I will do res.json Completion choices 0 message dot. That's not what I have, so I'm going to send a completion dot choices sub 0. So to actually get to the text that they send back, dot message dot content. So this will be the object that's sent back. Completion dot choices. What do you not like about dot choices? Oh, maybe I don't need curly's there. There we go. Completion choices message dot content. So now that I hit that, I should be able to go up here and say slash what is your favorite color. Now that is a get request. Of course, we're not. This is on a post request. So if I change this to a get, and now refresh that, I'm getting a response, right? So we're getting there because we have now sent a response to ChatGPT API and got a response back in a string at this point. And of course, you can navigate this object here and pull back different pieces of information sent back from this method. But we are in fact allowing the user at this point to use the URL to ask questions such as what is the best rated movie of all time? And you are handicapped by the speed of this back end, but according to this, it's Shawshank Redemption. So we're getting there, but we're not there all the way because we need to wire in our front end. We got the back end supported, but let's put this back to an app.post so that we can click a button and go from there. So that's our back end. Let's go back into our front end. I'm going to hit Control C on our front end, on our back end. Let's go back into the front end and source and app JSX. Kind of demonstrated that we're storing our question properly. Let's go ahead and bring in a bootstrap button. Class name of button primary. And sure, margin top 3. And ask our AI system a question. And for this, I'm just going to go back into here and run forget their run script, npm. I'm blanking. It is just dev, npm run dev. Okay. So we need a way to store the answer. So I'm going to make another hook. To store the answer. I'll go ahead and write a function, async function called handle submit. Definitely want to prevent the default. And let's bring in Axios, import Axios. That's how we're going to do our post to our back end. Import Axios from Axios. And now we'll store the data, await axios.post backticks http://localhost:3000/variable question. So this is going to run a post on this URL passing the question variable, that question hook, to our backend. And I'm going to do set answer to data.data. And you could maybe, if I do a console log, JSON stringify data, just to get an idea of what's in data object here. But here, this is going to pass our question to our backend using Axios and set the answer. And then down here in React, I'll do a little answer and, so when there's an answer, go ahead and put that in a I don't know, put it in an H2. Put the answer in an H2. And we'll put a bootstrap class name of text danger. So if there's an answer, put it in an H2. And on our button now, we need to simply call this handle submit. On click EVT handle submit EVT. And let's close that from running. I'm going to do another deployment build, so npm to redeploy our dist folder. Npm run build. Npm run build, so we update our front end. I'm going to go up a directory and run npm run start dev. So let's get our backend up and running. Backend still points at the front end. And what is the best rated book of all time? Yeah, we already know the movie of all time. And again, you are kind of handicapped by the speed here. And of course, I'm sure if you pay more money, you can get better, faster responses. But here you go. The best rated movie of all time, according to the most popular database, is Shawshank Redemption. So there you have it. We now have a full stack application that supports OpenAPI's API. And you can bring this into your app, and you can have AI in your app for the low cost of $5